Kia ora, ko Hemi tōku ingoa, no te aitanga o kupe, ko rangi tāne, ko Ngāti Kahungunu ki Wairarapa. Kia ora. The relationship between tangata tiriti and tangata whenua is always going to revolve around Te Tiriti o Waitangi. That document, Te Tiriti, was at the centre of our founding relationship, both historically, presently, and in terms of the future. The key function here is about building bridges, so rather than being the bridge. And I think the diagram in lots of ways just gives people a blueprint of all of the key elements that need to be in place and need to be connected in some degree or other in order to build successful bridges between different aspects of the community, but also between different cultures within our communities. I look back to when I was a lot younger, and I would be at a hui with my old people, and they were very shy and very reticent and often wouldn't stand on their rights as tangata whenua under Te Tiriti o Waitangi. And now that's the first and only point in conversation between tangata tiriti and tangata whenua is the treaty. Invariably is the first item of business when that encounter between those two cultures and those two identities arrive in the same room. So I think the diagram, I'm hoping, lifts the idea out of just being a two-dimensional list of words and triangles on a piece of paper, but more a conceptual idea in the mind and in the heart, that actually this is around that invisible touch, the special ability to figure out and to weave all of these dimensions together in a lived sense as opposed to in a literal sense. The centre part's the kind of classic Pātiki shape. As a design, it was very important and also very obvious in the work and the conversations that we had that document, Te Tiriti, was at the centre of our founding relationship and also is at the centre of our functional relationships between ourselves as different cultures and different communities within Aotearoa. It's the idea of having the two adjoining features in terms of tangata tiriti and tangata whenua was actually saying we're all in the same space, we're all talking about the same things, but we arrive with a different history, we arrive with a different set of perspectives, and consequently also arrive with a different set of values. Illustrating it diagrammatically so that people can kind of see the way that they coalesce and group around different aspects, but also the way that they interconnect and reflect amongst each other, both in terms of like an authority and a priority perspective, but also from a community and a cultural perspective. That's both in terms of a tangata tiriti perspective as well as a tangata whenua perspective. So in lots of ways, it's a complex model. I think it's quite a deep piece of research. The importance of people and the location of those people in place is a really fundamental way of understanding, connecting and being engaged with what's important from an environmental, social and commercial perspective. If I flip that on its head and think about it from a tangata whenua perspective, the whole idea around mana whenua, around mana moana, is exactly the same thing. It's around having the authority and the ability, based on where you stand and where you belong, to make decisions and make changes in terms of your long-term beneficial and sustainable outcomes. So by way of example, if I thought about kaitiakitanga, my understanding of that word is the idea around the multiplicity of interconnections of our natural environment and the people that surround it, and the animals and the flora and the fauna that surround it. So it's around understanding those multiple relationships and the relative importance of all of those connections in order to have a sustainable, flowing and growing environment. From a tangata tiriti perspective, the whole idea around interconnectedness and interrelationship is a very similar reflection. And in lots of ways, the diagram shows both how kaitiakitanga sits within its own framework culturally, but also from a tangata tiriti perspective, how interconnected and interrelatedness is also a similar reflection from a very non-Indigenous, from a Pākehā perspective as well. So whairawa, the pursuit of an objective, is ultimately determined by your ability to exert your influence, your decision and your authority. Mana motuhake is the authority and the ability to ultimately pursue and to achieve that goal. The idea around sustainable business relates directly to the ability of that business to also build connections and to build responsibility, not only amongst the business but amongst the community at large. So it doesn't sit and operate in isolation. It sits within its own cultural, social, environmental and local context. This diagram in this project outlines all of the key ingredients and outlines the interrelationship between those ingredients in order to come up with something that's really powerful and something that's really creative and something that everyone can benefit from. Giving people a really clear idea of the things and the key elements that need to be in place in order for a successful project to not only deliver but also to build connection and relationships so that that project and that community and that people can continue to endure. The diagram is just a distillation of all of the wisdom, the experience and the words that were shared amongst the working group, and I could just see how they were starting to connect and interrelate. So none of the diagram is my wisdom. My contribution was really to listen to the different strands and in some visual way weave those together into some sort of coherent and connected form. So I really want to acknowledge those that were part of the working group that offered their wisdom and their experience in order for me to weave this together and create a vision that I hope represents that conversation.